I still remember the night I realized I didn't exist in my own marriage. It was our 5th anniversary, and I had planned everything perfectly. A quiet dinner at home with candles glowing softly, her favorite food carefully prepared, and the same perfume she once said she loved, filling the room. I kept checking my phone again and again, hoping for even a single message. But hours passed, and the food turned cold, while the candles slowly melted away, leaving behind nothing but wax and silence around 11. I finally heard the door unlock, and she walked in, holding her heels in one hand. Her face tired, but completely expressionless. She looked at the table for a brief second, then at me, and instead of surprise or guilt, she simply sitted and said, "It was a long day at work," before walking past me. Like none of it mattered, like I didn't matter. I stood there, frozen, trying to find words, but nothing came out because deep down, I already knew this wasn't just about one night. This was about years of being ignored, years of being treated like I was just another object in the house, something that existed, but didn't need attention, didn't need love, didn't need respect. When we first got married, she wasn't like this. She used to laugh at my stupid jokes. She used to call me during the day just to hear my voice. She used to look at me like I was important, like I was someone she chose every single day. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Her career started taking over her time, her energy, her emotions, and slowly I started disappearing from her life. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that she was just busy, that things would go back to normal once things settled down. But they never did. Instead, it got worse. She started coming home late almost every night. Sometimes not even coming home until midnight, and when I tried to talk to her, she would either brush me off or say she was too tired. For this conversation, it felt like I was begging for the smallest pieces of attention from my own wife, and the more I tried, the more I pulled away, until eventually I stopped trying. Not because I didn't care, but because it hurt too much to keep being ignored day after day. I would wake up before her, make that breakfast, I knew she probably wouldn't eat it, and leave for work without saying goodbye. I would come back home, hoping maybe today would be different. Maybe today she would smile. Maybe today she would ask me how my day was. But most days, she wouldn't even notice I was there. She would be glued to her laptop or on calls discussing deadlines, meetings, targets, things that seemed to matter more than anything else in her life, more than me, more than us. There were nights I sat right next to her on the couch while she scrolled through emails, and I would just look at her wondering, when did I become a stranger in my own marriage? When did the person who once held my hand, like she never wanted to let go, start treating me like I was invisible? I remember one night I tried to hold her hand again, just like I used to, and she gently pulled it away, without even looking at me, saying she needed to focus on something important. That small moment hurt more than any argument ever could, because it showed me exactly where I stood in her priorities. And the truth was, I wasn't even on the list anymore. I started questioning myself, wondering if maybe I wasn't good enough, maybe I wasn't successful enough, maybe I wasn't interesting enough to keep her attention. I started blaming myself for her distance, convincing myself that if I just tried harder, if I just became better, somehow things would change. But no matter what I did, nothing made a difference. She remained the same. Distant cold, unreachable, and I remained the same invisible husband, living in a house that didn't feel like a home anymore. There were moments when I wanted to leave, pack my things, and walk out without saying anything. But something always stopped me. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the memory of who we used to be holding me back. Because I kept believing that one day she would realize what we were losing. One day, she would turn around and see me, standing there waiting for her. But that day never came. Instead, the distance between us kept growing until it felt like we were living two completely separate lives. Under the same roof, barely speaking, barely acknowledging each other, like strangers who just happened to share the same space. And then one evening, everything changed. It wasn't a big fight or a dramatic moment. It was something small, something so simple, yet so painful, that it finally opened my eyes. I'd come home early that day, hoping we could spend some time together, maybe watch a movie, or just sit and talk like we used to. But when I walked into the living room, she was already there, sitting with her laptop, typing away, completely absorbed in her work. I greeted her softly, but she didn't respond. I tried again, a little louder this time, and she finally looked up for a second before saying she was busy and couldn't talk right now. Everything inside me snapped at that moment. Not anger, not frustration, but something deeper, something heavier. It was the realization that I had been waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. I had been holding on to a relationship that only existed in my memories, and I had been losing myself in the process, trying to hold on to something that was already gone. I stood there quietly watching her as she went back to her work like nothing had happened. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to say anything. I didn't feel the need to explain how I felt or ask for her attention, because I finally understood that no matter what I said, it wouldn't change anything. She had already chosen her priorities, and I wasn't one of them at night. I went to bed without waiting for her, without saying goodnight, without expecting anything, and as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. I decided that I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep begging for love from someone who wasn't willing to give it. I couldn't keep being invisible in my own life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something different, not sadness, not pain, but clarity, a quiet understanding that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the most necessary. Sometimes you have to walk away, not because you don't love them, but because you finally start loving yourself. And that was the night everything began to change, even though she had no idea yet that soon I wouldn't be there, waiting anymore. Soon I wouldn't be the invisible husband sitting at the dinner table alone. Soon I would be gone, and only then would she realize what she had lost.